All right, I'm with White Gold Corp, Gold Explorer in the Yukon. David, good morning. How are you?
I am doing great, Robert. Good to see you again.
Yeah, it's good to see you too. It's good to get an update on White Gold. This is a company I've been a shareholder of for a number of years, company I've followed since 2020. And White Gold is a unique company for a few reasons. Your largest shareholders are some of the largest gold mining companies in the world, and also your land position in the Yukon is vast. So tell us, for somebody who's new to the company, new to the story, what is White Gold?
Yeah, happy to do so. And I think you hit the nail right on the head. It's a very unique junior gold exploration company for a number of reasons. And maybe I'll take a bit of a step back here. So I'm also a principal with the Power One Capital Group. We're a fully integrated merchant bank based in Toronto. We've been financing, investing in exploration development companies for over 20 years. So internally, we have a bit of a checklist that we run through when we're looking to make an investment. And this company really ticks all the boxes, right? And over the years, you sort of see what works, where you have your biggest success, and then you modify your list for that. And some of them names names you're close to. Collective Mining, for example, is a very important company that we're involved with, partners with our assessments, and he certainly did that, right? You have a team, you have location, you have prospectivity, and we learned that. We were his full partner on Continental Gold as well, where he had an incredible exit there. And for us, what are those checklists? First, you want the size of the prize needs to be big, right? This is a risky business, but you want to, when it works, when it does work, you need to be able to, have substantial returns for yourselves and your shareholders and all the stakeholders involved. Jurisdiction has always been on the top of our list. This day and age, it's never been more important than ever. Team, technical expertise, success in the past is very important, and prospectivity of your projects and legacy in the area is something also that we look at very closely. So this company, White Gold, for those that don't know it, we are based in the Yukon, Canada. We're actually in the Klondike area. This was the epicenter of the infamous gold rush, started 125 years ago and is currently going on today. It is likely the most prolific placer gold camp in Canada, potentially anywhere in North America, up there with the top projects in the world. There's been over 20 million ounces of gold mined from these placer creeks since that time, reported, probably more than that. But really, there's been no modern day exploration until our team, led by Shawn Ryan, went up there, and he has been tremendously successful in making multiple discoveries, much of that which is in White Gold Corp, and we really think we've cracked the code. We own a true district scale portfolio, as you mentioned, and we look at this opportunity as though we've tied up a prospective, not two deposits, but a potential camp in this great jurisdiction, which is a perennial tier 1 mining jurisdiction, and we think we've really cracked the code, and we're just at the early days of unlocking all that value.
So if White Gold is in the early days of unlocking that value, what is the long-term vision for the company?
What I see here is the ability to make many gold discoveries. So actually, I should say early days. We're quite a bit of a way through. We've actually had a tremendous success. So we currently now have, I would say, 2 or actually 3 main value categories within our company. The first is we have very large gold deposit. We call it the White Gold Project. It's made of 3 major ore zones. It's now over 2.3 million ounces of gold in all categories. It's one of probably the top 20 largest projects in Canada. But even more importantly, it's I think been ranked as the 5th highest grade gold deposit, open pit gold deposit owned by a junior in Canada, over 2 million ounces. So there is real value there. It's our team that made the discovery. To make that discovery, actually, it was a bit different in this area, right? So you might ask the question, why did it take 100 years for people to go exploring there? Like, this is the Yukon. It's a 3-hour flight from Vancouver. It's not some remote place in the middle of the jungle. And this is to the testament of Shawn Ryan, you had to look at it a bit differently. And what he realized, so Shawn comes from the Timmins camp. So his goal, his vision, his long-term vision, he wants to recreate the Timmins camp in this area of the Yukon, where they've been mining for over 100 years now, and where we're just scratching the surface. He's seen how these gold deposits just go down almost, infinitely. Eventually, you got to stop mining So he gets there. He says, "Okay, there's been 20 million ounces of gold. It's going to come to the sky. I'm going to find where it went from, where it comes from." But what's been unique and the challenge in this area, the code that he cracked, there's very little outcrop in this area of the Yukon because it was not glaciated. So he had to take a different approach to making discoveries. Most areas, Quebec, Ontario, there's outcrop. You got your ball peen hammer, the prospect out there. They get their samples, they bring it to the lab. That's what they tell. With no outcrop, you had to do something different. Shawn, he's a brilliant research scientist, and what he was able to do was use other approaches that are used in different areas of the planet, primarily guided by soil geochemistry to hone into these mineralized systems. And it's not necessarily like, oh, there's gold in the soil, maybe we should drill here. It's pathfinder elements, and he was really able to refine that. And once he was able to see what led to those discoveries, he took that technique and basically mapped out our entire portfolio. We now have the largest soil geochemistry database, I think, in the world, owned by one company. We've started to test a few of these targets. Obviously, we discovered this remarkable asset we have probably another 10 targets right beside that deposit, and then we have dozens more on the balance of our portfolio. So that's what's really the exciting part about this story. We have the meat and potatoes. We have this tremendous grassroots portfolio where we think there's almost unlimited opportunity. And like any camp, once the infrastructure comes in, which is something we should talk about later on, because that's like well underway now in the Yukon, it re-rates the economics for the entire portfolio. And I think that is the inflection point that we're just starting to head into with this company.
So the Yukon, in terms of gold mining, is very well known for the Klondike gold rush in the late 1890s, around the turn of the century. And Yukon is also known for placer mining. So still to this day, there is a large amount of placer gold mining activity in the Yukon territory. And there's even TV shows about it. But so for those who may not fully understand, gold exploration, the placer gold is free gold that's found in rivers and streams and small bodies of water. And you can basically just separate it with a pan sometimes, or just with a sluice box. But that gold came from somewhere. There's a source of that gold, and basically it became free and found its way to the rivers and streams over millions of years through weathering and gravity. But there's a source for it. And there are many gold deposits that have been found in the Yukon that are the potential sources for what we see in the rivers and streams. And it looks like White Gold has found a couple of those, at least, on its properties, the Golden Saddle and the Arc deposits. And you put out a resource update in January for these projects. Can you tell us about that?
For sure. So you're absolutely right. The Yukon is probably one of the richest, I think, territories or provinces in Canada. And what's so exciting to us, it's seen the least amount of work of any of these key camps. And if you look at that part of the continent, you have Alaska, you have BC. There is tremendous gold discoveries that's been made in the last sort of, call it 25 or 30 years. And if you look at the correlation to work done and gold discoveries, and then you look at the Yukon, you ask the question, why is the Yukon not seeing such prolific amount of gold discovery? And the answer is simple. The work wasn't done. Why wasn't the work done? It's what we touched on with the outcrop. In the last sort of 5 to 7 years, with Shawn Ryan making discovery in White Gold, which is 2.3 million ounces, so, this is your question. There's another big major discovery he made. It's called the Coffee Deposit. That's our neighbor directly to the south. That was owned by a company called Inferred Resources, where Shawn was their prospecting partner. That was sold to Gold Corp in 2016 for $550 million. You look at companies like Snowline, a tremendous discovery out there. I think that's over $1.4 billion market cap. As the work has started to get done and the work's accelerated, the discoveries have accelerated. Sitka's another great one. Banyan's another great one. The work wasn't done. So we have our deposit. Shawn makes this discovery. It's to the T based on his formula that he's developed. He starts with the soil geochemistry. Once that shows perspective, that's the mineralized system. Then he moves to more advanced type of exploration techniques. We implemented drones a long, long time ago. That's incredibly effective for covering the ground, environmentally sensitive. And also you can really get a great understanding of what the structures look like, LiDAR. And once everything looks perspective, that's when we'll start to drill. We use these air drills, we're called RAB drills initially, because our deposits, we're literally just scratching the surface. These all come to the surface. That's able to usually give good indication of mineralized structures. And once they validated that, then we'll bring in the diamonds. And what we've been able to do in the last several years is make this, what our goal was to demonstrate the fact that these deposits are large with prospectivity to get much larger. Now, as a junior mining company, instead of just sort of pounding on each ore zone once we made the discovery, we really wanted to demonstrate the prospectivity of that particular area. So we gave ourselves a 10-kilometer radius. And what we wanted to do was make a discovery, drill it for a season or two, show the critical mass, and then go find another one and another one and another one. So we've identified over a dozen targets in this area. In the past 3 years, we've actually been able to show more resources on another 3 of them. So you mentioned the Golden Saddle and Arc. There's also the VG Zone. There's also the Ryan Surprise. Between these 4, which will all be part of the same project, our total ounces is a little over 2.3 million ounces of gold, almost all in an open pit, and one of the highest grades of any project in Canada at about 1.7 grams per ton. And that is key. People, obviously your followers are familiar with the mining, but it's really, the grade is what affects the economics the most, along with metallurgy. The work we've done on the Golden Saddle, which is the most advanced, shows phenomenal metallurgy and recoveries. And what we've started to do now is, move down the process towards development and perform our own internal economic studies, which have been incredibly robust. Now, obviously, we're in an environment today where gold is $3,000. That's, fantasy. Could it go higher? I think it can. But, we're looking at these projects with a baseline of $2,000 an ounce gold. And we want to make sure they work there. And when we started these studies 2 years ago, they worked there. We've done our updates for inflation and everything else. They look even better. And then playing around with the numbers, I'm an accountant by background. It's just mind-boggling the type of value you can have in a high-grade open pit deposit in a great place like Canada. So we have these 4 zones. We believe each one of them is open for expansion along strike at depth. But where the real torque and juice is we have a number of these additional targets which have seen either no drilling or very limited amounts of drilling, where we think we can add a tremendous amount of ounces to our overall resources.
Yeah, I want to talk about some of the new exploration targets that have been worked up. But first, let's talk about Golden Saddle, because as you said, that's the most advanced deposit that White Gold has. And I'm just looking at the resource statement. It's about 1.4 million ounces. Let's call it roughly 2 grams per ton average grade. And this is an open pit deposit. Obviously, there could be an underground aspect to it as well that would add another 400,000 ounces according to this, resource update. But let's call it 1.4 million in the open pit at 2 grams per ton. That seems pretty good to me. And then I look at your market cap. I look at the gold price above $3,000 an ounce. What is an ounce of gold in the ground worth, David?
That's a good question. Yeah. And you're very astute to key on the fact of, that Golden Saddle on its own, over 1 million ounces at a high grade over 2 grams per ton. We get calls from others, like Australian mining type firms, like, what are you guys waiting for? Put that into production. That thing will make money for, years and years and years. And as you mine it, you'll find more. The Canadian approach is a little bit different. I don't know, which one is better. And in this type of environment, maybe, you have to start thinking to move these things down the road, because the value is certainly there. What's an ounce in the ground worth? It's an interesting question. If you were to go back sort of to 4 years ago, now that's in the height of the COVID, the stocks were all, very frothy. White Gold is trading over $1.30 a share. Our deposit is probably about 60% the size it is now, right? If you look, like White Gold is in this basket of junior mining stocks in Canada where they're probably trading somewhere between $10 and $25 an ounce in the ground. And that is at a historic all-time low. And, so what's even more of a head scratcher in that regard, we have gold at an all-time. So why do we have this disconnect? And I think there's a couple of reasons. The gold price has really started to rally. It's been, I don't know, since the summer, so maybe 8 or 9 months now. The capital markets typically will, wake up to the fact gold's moving, look to invest capital, but that money is always going to go to the biggest companies first, being the producer. So you see companies like an Agnico, right? One of, if not the best gold mining company in the world. It's gone from $65 to $160. And then as those sort of appreciate in value, the money will look to move down capitalization to the next level, being the mid tiers, which has happened. And then the next level being these tier one exploration companies like a Collective Mining, like a Founders, like a Snowline, which is all in the Yukon. And I think that next phase is to move to the junior explorers with the best and most advanced assets in good places. We haven't seen that yet. I think that's what we're on the cusp of. So we have this basket of juniors across Canada and other great places like Australia and some places in South America that are trading in that, call it $20 an ounce plus or minus. What's it worth? I mentioned the deposit beside us, the coffee deposit, also discovered by Shawn Ryan, our co-founder, was sold to Gold Corp for $550 million, and they paid $175 US an ounce. In 2016, when gold was, $1,600 an ounce, half of where we are today. So there's a lot of room, I think, that can re-rate this. And what's it going to take? I think, number one, just sort of the market playing its cycle out. I think two, the other, what's the catalyst, right? I think no one is disputing these are cheap. I recall, Beaver Creek in September, 9 months ago now, everyone's cheap, but what's the catalyst? Where's the FOMO? And I think things need to start moving. So I think with the gold price moving, with the money coming down cap, that's starting to move it a little bit. And I think the next phase is going to be M&A. We're starting to see an uptick in M&A, and what that leads to is more M&A. The guys I know on the street, are all very, very busy looking at stuff. So it's this unique environment. If you want to be a contrarian, or you look now, we have all-time lows on the equities and the juniors, all-time high in the commodity price. Listen, that's the perfect setup for me. We've been putting our money where his mouth is, investing more and more into all of our core names at Power One. White Gold in particular, I've been, very actively, buying more, obviously buying all the private placements, which I always do. It's just a really, really great setup that I think, when you look at a risk reward, it's pretty compelling.
So if we use the coffee as a good analog, perhaps, for the White Gold project, the Golden Saddle ARC, VG, Ryan Surprise, if I recall correctly, in 2015, 2016, when Gold Corp bought that, they had a resource of about 3 million ounces. And tell me if I'm off on that. And you said, they paid $175 per ounce for those ounces. So, if we look at the range of per ounce valuations, like $20 an ounce is sort of the low end of the range projects that the market seems to have some questions about, or they're low grade. And then on the high end of the range, you have coffee and some other ones, $175 or $200 an ounce. But if I look at Golden Saddle, 2 grams average grade, that's a good average grade. That's borderline high grade. It's open pit, or it's mostly open pit. And you're getting close to 2 million ounces in all categories, so that it's got scale. What is the market not getting?
I think the market is just, like I said, they're moving their capital into the bigger companies first, and it really hasn't cycled down. We're starting to see it now, and I think opportunities like this to explain to the market what the dynamic is and how people are forecasting it to go forward should be educational to people, right? And potentially a lot of people, if the gold price is moving up because it's a risk-off trade, which I don't think is entirely the case right now, junior gold companies could be looked as speculative type equities. But I do think the traditional investor is going to go to the largest cap companies first, and it's got to make its way down. Those cycles historically, before it gets to the juniors, it's about 12 to I think 18 months. I think we're really just starting to get there. And from what I see, from obviously the companies we're invested in, the companies I watch, they're starting to move, which is really sort of right on schedule. So I think between that, educating the public, a little more M&A, saw the Lumina Gold got taken out this morning, 70% premium to their VWAP. The buyers are willing to pay the upside because they know the value. They know also, and this is something you've touched on before, that these type of advanced deposits are few and far between. There's been such a dearth of exploration in the last decade that once these ones are gone, you got a 10-year deficit to try and make up for. And that's this other sort of aspect of where I think gold and other commodity prices, copper, it's really supporting it, because there's just these things in good places. There's not many of them out there left. And that's why I'm really just so proud and so excited to be sitting on this great asset in tier 1 jurisdiction with lots of growth potential. And that's before we talk about the rest of our portfolio, which has very similar type targets, which have either are about to be drilled or have never seen a drill on the gold side. And in the Yukon, like I mentioned, it is just so rich in all types of commodities. But one thing we are particularly, I think, well endowed with is critical mineral opportunities. The other company, which is beside Newmont, which is contiguous to our property, is Western Copper and Gold. They have one of the largest copper gold porphyry discoveries in Canada. I think it's like 20 million ounces of gold and 14 billion pounds of copper. We are literally in the shadows of that with targets that look very similar. So your question before, what is the market not getting? Is it a part of the cycle? Is it, depends where it is. As shareholders, as Power One being, the third largest share or second largest shareholder in this company after Agnico, we want to look for different ways to unlock that. Like, we're not getting the right value for this, really incredible gold deposit. We're not getting much value for this extremely exciting grassroots portfolio on the gold side. And then we have these critical mineral opportunities that are, as good or better than a lot of these other junior companies out there, which the market doesn't even know about. So instead of trying to confuse the story and have a gold company with, gold projects and copper projects and other critical minerals, we're actually in the process of spinning that out. So I think that'll help unlock some additional value here and really sort of help us focus the story and tailor it towards the investor base as they're starting to come and look at these types of companies.
So if I just do a quick back of the napkin calculation, I say, well, 2.3 million ounces in resource, let's give it $30 an ounce CAD per ounce valuation. Well, that covers your current market cap based upon my calculation. And then the potential is all the exploration, upside potential is there as just the blue sky for shareholders. So yeah, it's interesting. So you mentioned possible spinning out of some of the properties, but first I want to talk about some of the gold exploration targets. Yeah. So you have Golden Saddle, you have ARC, VG, and this is all on a property. It's basically the southern edge of the QV property, if I'm not mistaken, or maybe that's a separate property. But you have a map basically showing that this belt that extends quite extensively across the Yukon, river. And then there's a new target you guys worked up in 2024 that's very, very intriguing. You put out a news release on February 27th about the Chris Creek target. So tell us about that and why this is so interesting now.
That's a very exciting new target. So a couple of things that gets us so excited about it. One is the size. It's enormous. It's 2.4 kilometers. That's been mapped, open on both ends with some of the highest grade discoveries between what we've done on both ends. So we think that's continued to grow. But what really makes us excited about it is that it's almost an exact analog to the target that led to the discovery of the Golden Saddle when you look at the soil geochemistry. It's actually larger and more intense. So that's exactly what you want to see. We've done the geophysical work, the structure is there. So this is when you're looking to handicap the prospectivity of a new target, it's the best of the best that we've ever seen. So it is amazing. It's also part of a 5-kilometer long system where there's 3 other targets that have not seen hardly any work. So we're going to be going back to do that. And this is all within this 10-kilometer zone area where we've focused our attention. And in addition to this new target, just one thing that I wanted to touch on, and back to our strategy of making discoveries, moving to another area, just 1.5 kilometers west of the Golden Saddle is another zone we discovered. This is where that Ryan surprise discovery on. That's on a 6-kilometer long trend called the Ryan's Trend. You get the theme here, Mr. Shawn Ryan, with another 6 targets on it, and only 2 of them have been drilled. So these, as you know, and your followers may know, the best place to find gold is near an existing discovery. So we're literally just stone's throw away. A lot of these things are, the proverbial pearls on the string, and that's what we're starting to see. And we're extremely optimistic about the prospectivity of making more and more discoveries all in this area. And the best part about them being closed, they can all go into the project. So as you move this thing to development, you're able to increase your milling rates. And like I said, we've done these back of the envelope scoping type studies. They look extremely impressive at much lower price gold, and as you build the scale, that's just going to continue to improve. So it's the perfect setup, actually.
So the Chris Creek target, I kind of know how you guys operate after following the company for several years. You put out sort of news about your favorite targets in February, March, April, and then you drill them during the summer. And so this one looks very intriguing because, as you said, the gold and soil anomalies are just screaming, right? It's a very prominent gold and soil anomaly, and based upon all the exploration that Shawn Ryan has done and White Gold has done over the years, that raises the probability that there's a gold deposit substantially. Now, it says in this news release that you drilled 6 shallow diamond drill holes in 2024 at Chris Creek. What did those shallow holes tell you, and why are you excited still?
Yeah, no, listen, we were able to just sort of sneak those in right at the end of the season. We made a discovery. We always want to drill. We don't want to drill before we're ready, right? That's so important to us. That's why, people always ask, how do you prioritize your projects? We drill them when they're ready. So we had the soil anomaly, we did the surface work, we did the geophysical work, and we saw that the structure was there, and we were able to sneak in these 6 holes on 4 locations. And what excited us, it was, if you look at the rock, you look at the density of the veining, you look at the mineralization of the rock, it was exactly what we wanted to see. Every hole was mineralized with gold. So it was a tremendous success. This is an enormous target. We barely touched it. The structures are big. They're a very shallow dip. They come right to surface. So this is, there's a tremendous amount of opportunity for success here, I think, based on what we've seen. That's led to the success in our other deposits so far.
Okay, so this is definitely going to be a priority target for 2025?
This is certainly a priority for sure.
Okay. I'm interested to know about your biggest shareholders. So Kinross and, Agnico Eagle, 2 of the largest gold producers in the world. I think they're both in the top 5, actually. Why are they shareholders, and what are your conversations like with these 2 companies?
Yeah, we're extremely fortunate to be able to attract that type of an investor, and I think from our perspective, that just really validates our thesis about what the opportunity is here. I think they, like us, view this area of Canada as having prospectivity to be a true new camp in Canada. Started off as gold, now it's maybe gold and other critical minerals, and that's what these guys are about. I started off by saying, you got to think big. Well, when you have 2 of the biggest gold mining companies in the world as your investors, they're certainly thinking big and a lot bigger than we could ever have been. Agnico came in as our first partner when we set up the company, and I think that's what they looked at us as their Yukon exploration arm in this part of the Yukon. They've been tremendously supportive. We work very closely with them. Obviously, they're amongst the best of Canadian gold miners. They know how to work in the north. They know how to, they establish proper social license wherever they go. Been extremely beneficial from us being able to learn from them. So it's really the perfect situation. Kinross got involved when they made Shawn Ryan's discoveries were owned in Kinross, so they saw the fact that it was our team that had made the discoveries and were probably best suited to advance them. They liked the country, they wanted to maintain their exposure, so that's how we merged in part of their portfolio in the Yukon with us. Again, great group of people to work with. Based here in Toronto, we're sort of meters away from their head offices, and accessible to their teams at any time. So it's been a tremendous opportunity for us to work with these kind of companies.
So let's talk about the spin out of the other projects. So yeah, you're right. Like if you have copper projects or zinc projects or silver projects, sometimes it can cloud the story for a gold explorer. I mean, you're called White Gold Corp for a reason. You're a gold company. And most of your shareholders own the shares because they want exposure to gold discoveries and upside to the gold price and the gold sector. So tell us about the spin out. What's the plan for the spin out? Obviously, you do have a number of high potential porphyry targets that could have copper deposits. What's the plan for the spin out, and how will that affect shareholders?
So this is something that we're looking to execute sooner rather than later. It's in we're in the phase of just structuring it. You got to move properties around, isolating them. But to your point, it's a litany of critical minerals with copper, molybdenum, tellurium, bismuth, antimony, and so what the exact structure is going to be, it's probably not at liberty to say it right now, but fundamentally, shareholders of White Gold will receive shares in this new company, which will be a new standalone company that will be a listed public company. So it's almost, the way I view it is, I think it's a bonus, right? I think we've talked, and obviously I believe this, the company itself is extremely undervalued, but you're gonna get this new piece of value out there, and as a separate public company, there will be a value pegged to it. I think it's probably going to be, pretty respectable, compared to what zero, especially compared to what the zero it's getting right now. So it's you can look at it as a bit of a freebie, but that's always been our model. It's always been Shawn Ryan's model. And his, take a step back, when he brought the portfolio to us, he viewed this as a camp, as a project generator. You make a discovery, you prove critical mass, continued upside opportunity, and then look to divest of that in some capacity. So now some of our other projects are getting to that point, like the Golden Saddle at 2.3 million ounces. I fully believe it has the opportunity to get much, much larger. What's the next step for that? This is something that needs to start moving down the path of going towards production. And this is something we were considering before, and now in this environment, it makes complete sense to continue to start doing that. And so we're putting the plan in place to do that. How that plays out exactly, we'll continue to see. But then with these other new discoveries we've been making, like down on our Betty property, which we were talking about the grassroots upside in some of our projects. That's a discovery made in the last couple of years. We've done some work where we were hitting, just phenomenal type results, 3.5 grams over 50 meters from surface. This is a project that's on the same fault system that hosts Newmont's coffee project, right? We are in elephant country down there, and within our whole property. And like I said, the prize has to be big. We've been, extremely sort of, blown away by the opportunity in this part. I think the discoveries there will be lots and lots of discoveries of major deposits in this part of the Yukon. It's exactly what we wanted to get into. Everything we've done is leading us to believe that further. And I think the last piece of the puzzle that's really going to unlock all of this is infrastructure. So what you may have seen in the last several years, the Canadian and federal governments have announced very substantial investments to upgrade infrastructure in the territory, specifically to support mining exploration. These are in the orders of hundreds of millions of dollars. A big part of that is a road system. There's roads that are coming up to our portfolio through the south, through the coffee deposit and the casino deposit. And there's another road system that's coming from Dawson at the north end of our portfolio down to Newmont's coffee deposit. So what does that do? That just totally unlocks the accessibility to all of our portfolio, But more importantly, this now transforms this area into something more akin to a camp in the Abitibi or in Timmins, where once the facilities are up and running, let's say there's a heap leach down at the coffee, we'll have a mill at the Golden Saddle. You don't now need to go find 2 or 3 million ounces for that to be economic. You can go find 2, 3, 4, 500,000 ounces, and you're able to now truck that to one of these facilities. And so these are how these camps evolve. What's unique here is that this entire camp is basically owned by one company, being White Gold. And that fundamentally is what really makes us so excited about the opportunity and makes this company so unique, as you mentioned at the beginning.
Yeah, that's an important point, because you think about it, if White Gold had these projects, this land position in, let's say, Arizona or Idaho, the company's valuation would be many multiples of what it is today. I feel very confident, especially if it was in Arizona, because of all the infrastructure. It's easily accessible. You can basically get to any project in Arizona with a truck. There's very few places that you need to chopper to. But there's this perception that Yukon doesn't have much infrastructure. Some investors that I speak to in the sector say, well, I don't really love the Yukon because the power grid is a problem. But what you're telling me is there's been some big investments made. There's some big investments being made, and there's a transformation taking place in the Yukon. Is that correct?
That's absolutely correct. And we're forward thinking here. These are the opportunities. You hit it on the head. Imagine this was Arizona 50 years ago or Timmins 7 years ago. Listen, the time's going to move. Discoveries going to be made, and we really do own it all. To your point about power, the federal government just invested $40 million to update a study to connect the grid in the Yukon to BC, right? These things are happening. We see the importance of commodities globally. We're having an election here in Canada right now, and the number one topic is how do we improve access to our natural resources in Canada. Canada has the richest value of natural resources per capita of any country in the world. We're sitting here in a first world nation, and it has not been optimized. So what does that have to do? There's red tape, there's all these different issues, but I think irrespective of which government wins, they know that this is something that needs to change to improve Canada's ability to compete on a world stage, and not just mine it. They want to obviously process it as well to get the extra value add benefits to the Canadians.
It's very interesting for me as an American to observe the political conversation in Canada, and also being an investor in the Canadian mining sector for 2 decades. There's some, I don't want to say agreement, but God forbid, it seems like there's some overlap between the two sides with regard to natural resources. And I think it's quite simple, because politicians always want to spend money. Spending money is popular. Spending money gets votes. But how do you pay for that, right? And so the golden goose for Canada is natural resources. That's the goose that lays the golden eggs, that allows the government, the federal government, to do all the spending that it does. So sure, you want to give all these social programs, you want to have, healthcare, you want to give away money to this and that and that. Well, how do you pay for it? Natural resources. You have to promote the resource economy. And Canada has an unbelievable, exceptional endowment of resources, whether it's gold, whether it's oil, whether it's copper. And so it's good to see there's been a little bit of an awakening, perhaps due to a certain man south of the border. But whatever it takes, there had to be an awakening. Hopefully it sticks. I'm praying that this trend continues after the votes are tallied, and it's not just, the rhetoric on the campaign trail. I want to follow up a little more on the spin out, because this is very interesting to me, and I'm sure other shareholders as well. So you don't have full clarity on what it looks like, what the timing is. You're still working on it. But will this mean that if you're a White Gold shareholder, when you formally announce the SpinCo, they will receive shares in the SpinCo as a dividend?
They will receive shares as yes.
Okay.
It's the exact sort of tax structuring or whatever else, that's still to be determined. But the short answer is shareholders of White Gold will receive will receive shares in the SpinCo.
Okay. And just looking at some of the project portfolio currently, is Pedlar and Hayes going to be part of the SpinCo, you think?
Yes, so those are two of our most advanced and I think most prospective critical mineral projects right now.
Okay.
Big, the work's been done. A lot of similarities to the casino right down there. These porphyries happen in clusters, as you know, and some of the other companies you follow closely, you see that, right? And we just happen to be the benefactor of that shadow of the big discoveries that have been made.
Okay. And now, so a little more granularity on the plan for this year. So we talked about a couple of the projects that you're prioritizing for 2025. What else can you tell us about the plans and the budget timeline for 2025 season?
We're just in the process of finalizing our plans right now. You should hope to see an announcement there in the coming weeks. Clearly, these new discoveries up by our flagship deposit are going to see some more work. The Pedlar and Hayes, the critical mineral opportunities, are going to see some more work. There's a couple other earlier stage gold targets, which we've been working up in the last couple of years, which are begging for drill holes. You can see some work on that as well. So it's the double-edged sword of owning a property package this large is, how do you prioritize your properties? Even within our own teams, we have the geos fighting like, no, I want to do this, I want to do that. But what you can rest assured is these things will all have the proper work done, similar protocol to what's led to our discoveries in the past. We want to optimize our chances. We're just about to get underway, kind of chomping at the bit. Field season usually starts towards the end of May, early June, so about a month from now. And, I'm hoping we can put together another exciting season like we have in the past.
And we talked about Kinross and Agnico, but who are some of the other large shareholders of White Gold? And I'm interested to know how many shares you own, David.
So the other largest shareholders are the Power One Group. That's founded by Patrick Capital, probably one of the most sophisticated junior mining investors that I've ever met in my life. Shawn Ryan's another major shareholder. I think he owns 7 or 8% of the company. I don't know exactly what I own. It's probably just under 5 million shares, something like that. And it's growing. Keep buying more when I can. And, a few institutions in Toronto that we're close with. And then the balance is really, just sort of some of our close investor type friends that we work with in Power One. What we actually don't have a lot of yet, which is interesting to me, and this is something we're looking to change, are a lot of these gold mining investment funds that you would have seen in Canada, the States, and Europe. And I think we are now at a size and we have the critical mass that will start to be of interest to those types of companies. So in the next several weeks and months, we will be making definitive efforts to go out there and get the White Gold story in front of people like that. It just, I think it just checks all the boxes for them. It's a good asset. It's a good place. It's got good people backing it. We're in a good market. So hopefully that'll be another influx of interest that we'll see coming into the story.
Okay. And how much cash does the company have currently? And I know you're working on your budget and your drill plans for this summer, but are you thinking this is going to be a similar size program to last year, or are you going to go bigger?
Where we stand today, as things currently exist, we did a financing at the end of December. We raised a little over $5 million, and the plan was to fully fund us for 2025. So we are currently fully funded for 2025. If the opportunity presents itself or there's reason to do it and expand that program, that's certainly something we can consider at the right time.
Got it. Okay. And I guess final words, I think we've touched on a lot. Obviously, there is a lot to touch on with White Gold with that size of a property position. But what did I not ask you? What else do you feel is really important for investors to know about the company?
Listen, I think we touched on a lot. As an investor, I want to go back to where I started the conversation. You got, at the checklist, right? I think this company really checks the boxes more than most companies out there, and certainly amongst the best that I've ever had the privilege to be involved with. Right? We have the sponsorship of 2 of the best mining companies in the world. We have the sponsorship of Power One of Canada's leading mining merchant banks. Shawn Ryan is a brilliant prospector. He had a theory. It was incredibly successful. The amount of gold he's been able to discover in such a short period of time is remarkable, almost unheard of. This area is so highly prospective, and it's really seen so little work until now. And I think we've really cracked the code. So I've never been more excited about the prospectivity of the company. And fundamentally, I see the market more constructive today than I've seen in a long, long time. And the flow of capital, the interest of investors coming to the sector really will trump almost everything, right? All boats are going to rise with the tide. The companies with the best assets in the best places will raise the most. And that's what we're really starting to see. I think we're into a very strong, or the early days of a very strong gold cycle. It's playing out. The interest is coming to companies like White Gold. My phone's rang more in the last 2 months than it has in the last 2 years. So I feel extremely, strong. I have views about the prospectivity here and the constructive nature of the gold sector itself. And if this continues, I think we are going to have some fun times ahead of us here.
Yeah, it feels different than 2020. If it obviously that was a really nice market for junior mining for 4 or 5 months, but it didn't last. It was fleeting. This feels different, and I can't exactly put my finger on it, but it feels quite a bit different, and it feels like it will be longer lasting.
Yeah, I think it's a big part of that is, like you said, the world has woken up to the importance of these commodities globally. They've become politicized, but they are fundamentally critical to the advancement of the economies in Canada, down in the U.S., and that's being driven by the highest members of politics. So I think the setup is really we've been in this business for a long time, the both of us, and I agree. This type of a setup is probably the best I can remember in a long time.
All right, thank you so much for your time, David. I look forward to having an update conversation during the summer when the rigs are turning. Thank you.
Great. Stay tuned.